Welcome to the Academy of ICT Essentials for Government Leaders. This academy is a pioneering initiative in order to build the capacity of government officials at senior levels as policymakers and also at the middle level implementation officials who are responsible for the use of ICTs in the development of their countries. The linkage between ICT applications and meaningful development, which is what Module 1 is about, is actually an anchoring module. It is a very important module in the sense that we introduce all of you to the broad concepts and the broad experiences that various countries have had in trying to deploy technology to meet Millennium Development Goals. For this reason, what we have brought to you today is an updated version of what we had recorded earlier last year. The updated version contains a few more examples, but the core content remains the same. What I would be introducing you to in this module is really to a broad picture, trying to link for you to argue for you the case for the use of information and communication technologies for development, to describe to you the relationship between the Millennium Development Goals on the one hand and ICTs on the other, to foster a better understanding of the potential of using ICTs for socio and economic progress, to accelerate development, and to provide a development-oriented framework for ICT-based and ICT-supported projects and intervention in a range of social sectors. The Asia-Pacific region is actually home to almost 62 countries and a region of tremendous diversity. On the one hand, it has the least populated countries, small island states of the Pacific, while on the other hand, it has the Asian tigers, the hugely populated countries such as China, India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Pakistan. It is also home to the least developed countries in the world. It is home to landlocked states, to mountainous regions, and therefore the diversity of the world is actually captured in the Asia-Pacific region. So when we look at the Asia-Pacific region, we are particularly focusing on what we call the high target countries. The Millennium Development Goals, which actually lay out a framework of action for the global community, charge upon the global community and multilateral agencies the responsibility of addressing specifically the needs of these least developed, landlocked and mountainous regions of the Asia-Pacific. And APCICT and the UN-APCICT have chosen to focus to a large extent on these high priority countries of the Asia-Pacific. Notwithstanding this, we also take a look at experiences that have enabled us to understand the linkage between ICTs and development in many other countries where there have been some successes, there have been some failures, and where the success and failure is actually because of a linkage of the linkage between the two very important concepts, and also of the understanding of the context, the conditions, and the sectors. I would be taking you through over the next 5 sessions of this Module 1 over the broad range of issues. Other modules cover more specific issues in the deployment of ICTs for development. Module 2, for instance, looks at the policy-making process. Module 3 looks at e-government and e-government applications. Module 4 looks at critical security issues that emerge when we look at applying ICTs. Module 5 looks at trends in development of technologies. Module 6 looks at governance of the internet. Module 7 looks at project management, and Module 8 is also a very important closure which looks at different options for funding ICT initiatives. While I will be giving you a bird's eye view picture of everything, colleagues who are doing the other modules will be explaining to you in detail the processes that are engaged in each of these 8 modules. This is an evolving process, it's a work in progress. So therefore, we envisage that there will be more modules, more sector-based, more focused, but the themes remain the same that as they do in Module 1. That is the critical importance of the use of ICTs to achieve the Millennium targets that are set for the world by 2015. Very quickly, the Millennium Development Goals, which are the most widely supported global community commitment, are a set of goals and targets, goals which are broad aims, targets which are specific and consequently measurable indicators of how countries are progressing. When we say measurable indicators, we say that it is possible to monitor how a country is achieving in terms of reaching these specific goals. Goal 1 looks at the eradication of extreme poverty and hunger, which a large part of the world still faces. Goal 2 looks at achieving universal primary education with a specific focus on getting all our children into schools and ensuring that they have basic primary education skills. Goal 3 looks at promoting gender equality, without which development cannot take place. Goal 4 looks at reducing child mortality. Goal 5 looks at improving maternal health, again one aspect of health which has been the focus of attention by many multilateral agencies. Goal 6, combating HIV/AIDS, malaria and other diseases. Goal 7, ensuring environmental sustainability, and Goal 8, developing a global partnership for development. Each of these goals is important in itself, and all of them are interconnected. When we begin to look at what has been the achievement of the Asia-Pacific region in terms of addressing or reaching these Millennium Development Goals, the broad picture that emerges is that progress is uneven. By uneven, we say that some countries may be moving more closely toward achieving some goals. Other countries that seem not to achieve some goals and targets are still moving ahead. So progress is uneven, but there are very visible and widespread gains in this part of the world as compared to other parts. Asia Pacific is doing better, it is argued, than sub-Saharan Africa. It is on course to achieve a majority of the targets that have been set for the global community. The region has 5 of the largest populated countries: Bangladesh, China, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan. And when we look at these development goals and we look at ICTs, we cannot forget either the contribution made by these large countries, nor can we forget their impact upon achieving the goals. But when we again look at this region, what is it that we see? What we see is that the least developed countries of this part of the world, some of whom will be listed on the Human Development Reports as being the least developed, still have the region's highest rates of child and maternal mortality and tuberculosis. We also find that HIV/AIDS continues to rise in this region, and that as countries are on a developmental path and on an economic growth path, we are regressing in terms of environmental sustainability. We also find that there are huge data gaps, especially from post-conflict countries and the Pacific region. And in countries like India and China, which are considered to be the superpowers of today and tomorrow, there are, however, great intra or within the country disparities. That is, within China and India as countries, you will find a great disparity between growth rates of different parts of the population. And these are important things to remember, because when one looks at the overall growth rates and one begins to examine them, we find that we cannot ignore the factors that make for these differences. What all of this means in terms of reaching the Millennium Development Goals is that there is a great need for more public investment in the social sectors, particularly in education and health. These two sectors can make the difference between achievement of goals or not achieving them. There is also a problem is that we cannot necessarily equate social outcomes with public expenditures, because there are other factors at play. For example, by merely looking at enrollment figures of girls in schools, we still cannot arrive at whether the young girls in the schools are dropping out or not dropping out, because their dropping out of school is as much influenced by the quality of education as it is by child and girl-friendly schools and by cultural factors. So there are a variety of issues, so you cannot directly link just a growth pattern or the investment in education and health to automatically improved outcomes. There are other factors that can explain the cause for this uneven progress, and that is partly poor governance, poor policy choices, corruption, and in some cases a denial of human rights. These factors also explain why progress is uneven in many of these countries. Under these circumstances, the question of whether we can or we cannot reach the Millennium Development Goals is open. What is very clear is that we have to use any and every means in order to accelerate the pace of development so as to reach the goals. If we have to accelerate the pace of development, then there is no choice perhaps, or that we have to look at what is it that current information and communication technologies, which have transformed the world and made it into a global village in other aspects of our lives, what it is that ICTs can do to accelerate the process of global development. There is enough evidence and research to show us that ICTs are able to provide linkages for complex planning processes. Things like modeling, things like projection, things like planning become easier when we're able to apply ICTs and the capabilities to this process. ICTs also enable us to coordinate across different sectors. For instance, it is possible to coordinate information that is gathered in the health and the education sector so that the two major sectors can then work better in a better manner. We can also, through technology, improve increased information sharing. We can also improve our reach, our reaching out to those parts of the population who have not been accessed before. So we can have outreach, and we can also monitor effectively whether indeed these services are really being delivered. And there are many ways, and these will be explained to you as we go through the modules. We can scale up access to education for those to whom going to school means crossing a socio-economic or a geographical barrier. We can increase access to them by taking education to their homes. We can link communities to markets directly or indirectly using ICTs. And we can create disaster warning systems. These become very important in the context of basically climate change and the impact that it is having upon disasters worldwide. But to understand what we have to do, we have to move from a know-how to what I would like to call a do-how. We are aware generally that we can do it, but yet the information and the knowledge about how to do it leaves much to be desired. We also need to understand the context and the conditions of use of ICTs, because like any other technology, unless it is properly, appropriately and meaningfully applied, ICTs have a potential of doing more damage than good. So it is necessary for us to understand in what context they can be applied, in what conditions they can be applied, to understand their strengths and to understand their limitations. So what are these technologies that we talk about today? These technologies are not something new. They have been around for a long time. We are familiar with them as older technologies of radio and TV. But with the coming of the computer age and the internet age, we have to re-look at the definition of what ICTs are. ICTs are basically information handling tools, a variety or a varied set of goods, applications and services that are used to produce, store, process and distribute and exchange information. They include what we call the old ICTs, such as radio, television, and yes, even the telephone line. And they combine these with the new ICTs, which are computers, satellites, wireless technologies, and the internet, right? These different tools are now able to work together, to combine in such a way as to form a massive infrastructure of interconnected telephone services, standardized computer hardware, and the internet, radio, and television, which reach to every nook and corner of the globe. This is a UNDP definition taken in 2003. But essentially what we're talking about is that what comes to us, sometimes for pleasure, sometimes for entertainment, sometimes for knowledge, is also a tool that can be combined in order to provide the convergence and provide the ability for us to use for development. When we begin to look at ICTs and we begin to look at what are the different kinds, it is necessary for us to understand that not all of them are the same and that each and every one of them have different strengths and different weaknesses. From your own experience with television, you will know that you have to be at the time when the news is read out, otherwise you will miss the news. So we have two kinds of ICTs, what we call the synchronous ICTs and what we call the asynchronous ICTs. Essentially, the synchronous ICTs means that both parties, the person who is sending the message and the person who is receiving the message, may be at different places, but they must be together at the same time. So to listen to radio, to listen to television, it is necessary that both parties come together, although in different places, at the same time. This being the case, what are these synchronous? Traditional television, traditional radio, traditional teleclassrooms, teleconferencing, the broadcast or a radio cable company, and to some extent computer conferencing while we are on a live chat are parts of what we call synchronous technologies. Asynchronous technologies are more familiar to us and they're also more flexible. Asynchronous technologies means different times and different places. A very simple example of asynchronous technology is the email. I send you an email, you see it at your convenience. You and I are not at different places same time. So computer-based learning, whether it's in multimedia or it is a web portal, whether it's a computer-based conferencing in a virtual conference, computer file transfer, electronic bulletins and notice boards, as I said, emails, multimedia websites, and e-learning are all examples of asynchronous use of ICTs. For instance, an e-learning portal would enable me to go at a time convenient to me, which may be early in the morning, but would allow you to learn at a time convenient to you, which may be late in the evening after your day's work is done. And both of us have access to the same standard of quality of content, except that we are not together at the same time. And that is what asynchronous technologies are about. Both are possible in the use of today's ICTs, but both have to be mixed and matched based upon what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses. When we look at the strengths and weaknesses of different ICTs, I would invite you to look at the table that is given in the module. We know, for instance, that print technologies, you can read a book, you can read a newspaper over and over again, but it does require basic literacy to be able to read, and therefore, while it has a strength of a circulation and in-depth, it also has the weakness of not being able to cross the literacy barrier. When we look at broadcast technologies such as radio and TV, while these may cross the barrier of literacy and they may provide us a speed of delivery and they provide us different kinds of experience, they allow the national television to broadcast a message to everybody at the same speed with the same quality. They are still have their weaknesses. They're easy to use. They're easy to use by any one of us, but in many parts of the world, including in the Asia Pacific, there are limited use of them because there is limited access. They're static in time, and they're sometimes, because they're synchronous, they are also homogeneous in content. Updating is difficult for radio and it's difficult for television. This is one part of information and communication technologies, which is its significant advantage, the ability to update. And older technologies do not have this easy ability to update information. Because the costs of producing television or radio sometimes are very prohibitive, there are problems in terms of repeatedly updating content, and they are not also problem or location specific. In other words, a program that is produced for a national audience, let us say in a country like India, will not necessarily reflect the problem of one small part of the country. This is a weakness of the old technologies. They are not location or problem specific. There is very little interactivity. The audience or the user or the viewer cannot interact with the content. This makes it not so effective as a learning tool. So each one of these media have their own strengths and they have their own weaknesses. Each one of these ICTs can be used for different purposes in different circumstances. What the current ICTs, which are the focus of these modules, that is the digital, the computer and the internet-based technologies, are interactive. In other words, we interact with the content the way we interact in a website. They are also easy to use once there is basic skill. They are low per unit cost. In other words, the same quality at a very low unit cost can be distributed irrespective of whether a person is in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, a remote part of Afghanistan or Pakistan, or still in a remote island in the Pacific. Same quality, low cost per unit, and therefore we allow what we call economies of scale, so we can mass produce material but still make it location and problem sensitive. We can update very easily. We can update on a daily basis, hourly basis, and it's very easy to use. But still, current and new ICTs do have their weaknesses, which we have to understand. Among the weaknesses are that there is still limited access in many parts of the world. There's still a lot of costs involved in development of content. Experts need to be trained. Officials need to be trained. Computer literacy is necessary for use. Therefore, we find that local content, particularly in local languages, is still hard to come by. And until we manage this transition and the possibility of developing local content, it will continue to be difficult. But the real issues in the use of ICTs are not the issues of the computers or the hardware. These work, we know they work, the softwares are available. These are the real issues of human resources, of political will, of an inadequate understanding of how, when, and why one should use ICTs. And these are the key issues that one has to address. So as we go through these, we will begin to explore how best we can transition from inadequate to effective use of ICTs. I would like to introduce you at the end of Module 1 to the concept of convergence. Convergence is essentially the coming together in a seamless process of all telecommunications and internet technologies with all media, text, audio, video, graphics, animation that are delivered on a single or common platform, and yet you as a user can choose any combination together or separately as you desire. For instance, when you look at AVA, the APCICT Academy Virtual Academy, what you can do is you can refer to the text, you can look at this video, you can look at case studies, you can do the practical exercises, and you can do each one of these together or separately as per your convenience and your ease of use. But all of these are delivered on that little laptop that you have, and you can see these just as well in a Pacific island, in a remote corner of Afghanistan or Pakistan, in New Delhi, in Mali, in Dhaka, in any part of the world. And if you don't happen to be in your region, you can access it through the internet anywhere with the same quality of content. So that is what convergence is about in terms of technological concepts, the coming together on a single platform. And that is what gives us the power of technology. At this point, I will stop to bring you to the end of session 1 to give you an opportunity to reflect on the ideas that have been presented here. There is, I realize, a lot of information that has come, and therefore you must use this presentation alongside the text of the module, which explains many other things. The idea initially has been to toss up the ideas, to toss up the thoughts so that you can reflect further. So we come to the end of the first session of Module 1.